When two teenage girls vanish overnight, the residents of Grass Valley, California don't know what to think.
There was wild speculation.
They really thought that they had either run away or been abducted while they were hitchhiking.
As the townfolk look for answers, rumors start flying. Could someone they all know be responsible?
It's definitely somebody who knew the area, so it was someone among us.
A person you were standing next to could have done this.
Fear has taken hold of this tight-knit community, and it's about to crack. How well do you know your neighbors? What lies behind the white picket fences? Safely tucked among the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, 60 miles north of Sacramento, California, is the small town of Grass Valley.
It's an amazing place. Very laid back. It's an old mining town.
The mining element of the town is very much celebrated still to this day. There are lots of monuments to mining around town. People still pan for gold. It's very much a part of the history.
It is a frontier spirit where you do feel like you can do anything here.
The area's rich history is matched only by the community's heart of gold.
You know, a lot of people can't go to the store without seeing somebody you know.
You could leave your keys in the car or your front door unlocked.
There is a lot of friendly people in Grass Valley, and they will just give their shirts off their back to you.
In the summer of 1994, Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell are 16-year-old best friends, about to enter their junior year in high school. The two girls have been tight ever since Chrissy's family moved to the area from San Jose 3 years earlier.
I think they were craving a slower-paced life, a safer environment. Chrissy didn't know a whole lot of people.
They met through mutual friends just from being out and about. It's common to run into people and then just strike up a friendship with them, and then friendship circle grows.
Want to join us? Yeah, sure.
Having just completed the school year, the two friends have plans to spend their whole summer vacation together. They wouldn't have it any other way.
Dawn and Chrissy would have been looking forward to just not having to worry about going to school, just being able to hang out together.
I think they would have been spending their summers at the river or the lakes or walking around town. I know that Chrissy and Dawn did have a lot of sleepovers.
And on Saturday, July 23rd, it's no different. The girls make plans to spend the night at Dawn's house. Before going out for the evening around 4 p.m., Dawn's mom checks in.
Hey, ladies, so what's the plan tonight?
Like just about every Grass Valley teen, the girls get their kicks in town.
Mom, we're just going out.
Well, pizza's in the fridge.
Let's go.
The catch is finding a ride.
It's a very rural community. If somebody's going into town and you want to go, well, you're going to go.
And not having a car, then you make friends with somebody who does have a car.
To have a car in this town is everything, if only to go cruising with friends.
We'd drive around a lot and we'd listen to music, we'd make mixtapes. Hanging out on a Saturday night, that was fun times.
When Dawn's mom and stepdad get home late that evening, there's no reason to believe that the girls aren't in bed. It's not until 10 a.m. the next morning, when Chrissy's mom heads over to Dawn's house to pick up her daughter, that the parents realize the girls aren't there.
Ladies, time to...
Chrissy was good about notifying her parents of her plans when she was away. This was considered highly unusual.
Chrissy's mom was worried, and they were both just like, we need to figure this out. This is something's wrong.
The more the parents talked to the neighbors and didn't find anything out, the more they searched and canvassed the area, they started to realize that there really wasn't anything left to do except to involve the police.
By late Sunday afternoon, Chrissy's parents call the Nevada County Sheriff's Department to report the girls missing. Because they're minors, the Sheriff's Department acts immediately.
It's not very common for two girls to just disappear.
Deputies meet with Dawn and Chrissy's families and friends to gather more information.
The officers obtained the names of their close friends and where the parents suspected that they may go.
You know, she's a teenager and she was having some trouble.
I got a phone call saying, do you know where Chrissy is, or do you know where Dawn is?
Do you know where they were going?
They told me they were going out.
When officers questioned Dawn's mother,
Well, they didn't tell me exactly where.
she admits it's not the first time Dawn has taken off for a few days.
It's really not like her. She always calls.
But this time it's different. She's never left before without some indication of where she was going.
Dawn, she was a free spirit and she would go places a lot, but she always called.
Feeling helpless, Dawn's family puts their trust in the police, praying they'll find their daughter before something awful happens.
I just remember hoping that she was out there. I just wanted that phone call or for her just to come walking in the door, smiling.
Chrissy's parents have no explanation for her disappearance other than being new to the area.
We just moved here not that long ago from San Jose, and she did miss her friends, but she seemed to be doing okay.
I think for any teenage girl moving anywhere could be difficult.
Friends of Chrissy's knew that she missed San Jose and thought that maybe she had run back there.
I was shocked, but not completely alarmed. We figured Chrissy was kind of craving the San Jose lifestyle.
Detectives wonder, could the two girls have skipped town together? Anything else seems too far-fetched.
No kidnappings, no murders. None of this stuff happens in this small town. It's like, hey, they must have ran away. I mean, that's got to be the only answer.
Friends and family, on the other hand, refuse to leave anything to chance,
Have you seen our friends?
focusing their efforts close to home.
We had taken their pictures around town,
No, I haven't seen them, sorry.
asking if anybody had seen them.
Have you seen these girls?
No, I haven't. I'm sorry.
Excuse me, have you seen this girl?
Around town, the girl's disappearance is a hot topic of conversation.
Sorry.
At first, friends try to make sense of the situation, saying the girls probably just took off hitchhiking. After all, everyone around here does it.
It's known that people hitchhike, especially when you don't have a license.
But with each passing day, hope is overtaken by fear.
The longer the girls were missing, people in town started thinking that maybe something had happened to them while they were hitchhiking. Maybe something had really gone wrong.
I think that everybody started silently panicking that they haven't been found, and where could they be?
The fear feeds rumors of foul play, including morbid notions that the girls have been abducted, or worse, taken to a notorious hangout in the mountains.
There's a place not far from Dawn's house called the Roundhouse. It's remote, so kids frequently go there, drink, smoke, do whatever kids do.
The secluded spot also has a more sinister reputation.
While it was a place where people would hang out, it was also a place where people would go to practice the occult.
It's marked with a lot of graffiti, and some of it is satanic in nature, pentagrams, that kind of thing. And sometimes people have complained that they've found the remains of sacrificed animals, birds, cats.
Maybe they had been abducted by people who practiced the occult at the Roundhouse, and had they taken their sacrifices to a whole different level.
Police have had trouble with teens at the strange site before. But officers dismiss the devil talk as nothing more than tall tales. Still, local parents are spooked and aren't taking any chances.
My parents, they kept a tight leash on us a little bit after that. You're coming back early. You're not going out in the middle of the night. Keep curfew. Kids didn't go out alone. Everybody was just kind of freaked out about this.
Investigators are just as anxious, knowing that the fate of 2 young girls may be in their hands. Then, on Tuesday, August 2nd, 10 days after Dawn and Chrissy's disappearance, the Nevada County Sheriff's Department gets a chilling call. 2 local men have discovered human remains in a remote area of the county.
This had to be someone who had complete disregard for human life.
2 bodies dumped in a trash heap. You know, that's not usual. That's scary.
It's Wednesday, August 3rd, 1994, 11 days since Grass Valley, California teenagers Chrissy Campbell and Dawn Donaldson disappeared. 2 bodies have been discovered at an illegal dump site outside of town. And as investigators break down the scene, their stomachs turn.
Bodies were unceremoniously dumped. There was no attempted burial or any digging a grave. What gave away the position of the bodies was probably the odor.
You have bodies that had been out in the hot sun for over a week, badly decomposed. The smell alone was just impossible to take.
The skulls are badly crushed, leaving no doubt this was murder. And investigators have reason to believe that the killer or killers must be local.
We felt that whoever dumped the bodies there had been there before. It's so remote that you wouldn't find this place as a destination by accident.
They can also tell the victims are female by the tattered clothing and jewelry on the bodies. Yet, strangely, for a homicide, something is missing.
There was an absence of blood at the dump site. And with these types of injuries, there would be a lot of blood. We determined that the homicide probably occurred someplace else and that the girls were transported there.
As the bodies are carefully removed, investigators spot something else intriguing: the torn pages of a pornographic magazine. There's a chance they're tied to the murder, so the evidence is bagged and sent to a crime lab in Sacramento, while the bodies are taken to the local mortuary.
Identification was going to be the next priority.
The bodies of 2 women were found.
In a small community like Grass Valley, the discovery is front-page news.
By 2 passers.
The press reported almost daily about what was happening. This became the lead story every single day.
The County Sheriff's Department believes the bodies may have been there anywhere from a week to a month.
When I first heard that 2 bodies were found, I didn't want to put 2 and 2 together. I didn't want to know.
Though few in the community doubt who the victims are, the families are holding their breath until the identities are officially released.
When I heard that there were 2 bodies found, in the back of my head probably knew that it was a very good possibility that that was my sister and her friend.
On August 4th, the following day, Detective Sergeant Ron Smith is already working a full caseload in the sex crimes unit when his captain calls him into his office. With the department's 2 homicide detectives out of town, Smith is assigned the double homicide case.
One of the reasons they put me on the case, because they thought, well, more than likely, it's a rape gone bad. The possibility of a sexual predator was evident because of a few factors. The age of the girls, they were both attractive. And then we have the additional evidence of the porn magazine. I had never been assigned a case like this before. Being designated the case agent on a double homicide of two teenage girls, for me, was huge.
Not until Smith reviews the coroner's report does he fully understand the extreme brutality of how these young girls were slaughtered.
Both girls suffered traumatic head injury, and they died of blunt force trauma.
The heads of the two victims had been bludgeoned. They had been beaten repeatedly with a heavy object.
The report also confirms Dawn and Chrissy's identities. Detective Smith is charged with delivering the painful news to the families.
I went to each of the two houses and informed the family that the dental records showed that their worst beliefs were actually true. Yeah, it was tough.
I remember telling my mom that it couldn't be them. So I was in denial. I just remember telling her, it's not them, it's not Dawn and Chrissy.
When the identities were released to the public, I was actually watching TV and I saw it on the news.
Dawn Renee Donaldson and Christina Maria Campbell.
I immediately just started crying. I went over, grabbed my mom. I'm all, hey Mom, look at this. This is both of my good friends.
I think that this case consumed Nevada County because it was two young girls murdered. The bodies were treated like trash, just dumped, left in the middle of nowhere. And who did it?
Who did it is on everyone's mind, and as detectives continue to look for answers, Dawn's mother recalls a new detail about the day the girls went missing.
Detective, I remembered something. I think you should check in with Trudy.
She believes their friend, Trudy Sappho, may have given them a ride into town that evening.
Trudy, Don's mom tells us you were with the girls last Saturday. Is that correct?
Yes, we hung out in town.
Trudy said that she had driven Dawn and Chrissy to a couple of different locations. They went into Grass Valley and hung out, and they later hooked up with Trudy's boyfriend.
Then, Trudy drops a name that detectives recognize.
The last time I saw them was walking into Sam's front door.
They took Dawn and Chrissy to Sam Strange's house, and that was a huge red flag.
Sam Strange has a reputation around town for partying and hanging out with the wrong crowd.
Hey, what's up, guys? Come on in.
When Trudy dropped Dawn and Chrissy off at Sam's house, that's the last time she saw him alive.
On August 4th, 1994, 2 days after discovering the brutally beaten bodies of Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell, Grass Valley, California detectives are on their way to question the person they believe was the last to see the two teens alive. According to the girls' friend, Trudy Sappho, she dropped them off at Sam Strange's house the night they disappeared.
What's up, guys? Come on in.
Hey, Sam.
Sam's known around town as a bad boy with a history of finding trouble.
He has had some trouble with the law. And in town, he was often looked at as someone who drank too much, who partied too much.
Hey, everybody want around?
We had determined that Sam was kind of hanging out with a loser group, and his parents kind of had him on informal family probation. He was supposed to not engage in the party scene, stay clean and sober, be productive.
Where were you Saturday night?
When detectives ask Sam about Trudy's story, he says the girls didn't stay long.
Sam said Dawn and Chrissy were only at his house for about 20 minutes. They wanted him to give them a ride into town.
Sam, can you give us a ride?
No.
And he said that Dawn replied that they would go ahead and leave and hitchhike into town.
Let's go.
And Sam closed the door, and that's the last time he saw him.
Sam appears cooperative and happy to help.
Hitchhiked into town.
He seemed to answer our questions truthfully. He was clean-cut, nothing unusual about his appearance. He was polite. Yeah, it just seemed like a normal guy.
They left 20 minutes after they got here.
But his alibi for that Saturday evening is weak at best. He says his dad was on a camping trip and his mom was out.
When we asked Sam about his whereabouts on the night of the 23rd, he told us that after the girls left his front porch, he just stayed home and watched TV.
Given his weak alibi and checkered past, the detectives aren't ready to clear Sam. But before they leave, Sam recommends they check in with Dawn's family. They'll vouch for him. And when they do,
Maybe speak with you for a moment, please.
they learn Sam is quite close to the Donaldsons.
Sam was a friend of my oldest sister's. They had known each other for years.
Do you have any sixes?
He was almost like a family member.
You got any fours?
You looked at my hand.
No, I didn't.
It might seem odd for a 21-year-old guy to be hanging out with a 16-year-old girl, but the families did know each other, and because he was friends with Dawn's older sister, he thought of Dawn as a little sister.
Stop looking at your cards.
And when asked if there'd be any reason why Sam might hurt Dawn,
There was never anything that would make me not trust Sam or my sisters being with him.
the detectives are hoping Dawn's family will remember something new,
There's got to be something else that you can give us.
an extra detail. Then, Dawn's older sister recalls someone who'd been bad-mouthing Dawn.
Dawn did have an argument with a guy named Ethan.
Ethan Haldane. It's another name detectives are familiar with. Like Sam, Ethan's no angel.
Ethan had a bad reputation around town. He was also known to be a partier, drinker, not someone you might want your children to be hanging out with.
Ethan also has a mean streak, and according to Dawn's sister, he's been threatening Dawn.
Apparently there had been a situation recently where Dawn had borrowed Ethan's car, and Ethan was still very mad about this. About 2 months before the murder, Ethan and Sam had been drinking in town, and they ended up back at Dawn's house. Dawn came out the next morning and asked Ethan if she could borrow his car.
Ethan, can I borrow your keys?
Yeah.
Ethan had loaned
Thanks.
Dawn his car. She apparently told him that she was going to keep the car for an hour or so.
Hours went by and he started getting annoyed, so he called Sam and said, "Can your dad come get me at Dawn's house?"
I've been waiting here for hours. Can you give me a ride?
And during this little drive, Ethan said he was really angry with Dawn.
I'm gonna kill her.
Eventually, Dawn drove up with his car. She tossed his keys at him and gave him a little smile, and he took that as a little insult. Like she thought she basically had gotten away with using his car all day without his permission.
The incident is enough for Detective Smith to consider Ethan a person of interest. But before he can question him, they receive news from the crime lab. It seems that torn pages from the pornographic magazine have more than salacious images to share.
They found a fingerprint on one of those pages that were found at the initial crime scene, and we were elated.
When the investigators found a print, they thought, "This is it. We have our killer."
On August 9th, 1994, a week after Grass Valley teens Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell's bodies are found, the two families hold memorial services for their lost daughters.
I remember it was a nice service, and afterwards we kind of all just hung out in the patio area and played some songs for her. When you're crying, you're sad, you're hurt, you're saying goodbye. It's final. Like, it can't get more real than that.
The heavy sorrow stretches across town as loved ones gather at Chrissy's memorial service.
We lost Chrissy. My whole world was crushed. How do you recover from that?
I remember it to this day, walking in and seeing a picture of Chrissy right in the front. Going in, sitting down for a little while, and then it started kind of breaking down, and then I had to go back outside.
The grief that hangs over Grass Valley turns to frustration. A week has gone by since the murder investigation began, with little progress.
The sheriff's office was under such pressure to solve this case, and their leads hadn't been heading anywhere.
Residents are demanding answers. How can this horrible crime have happened to their children?
911, what is your emergency?
Leads began pouring in to the sheriff's department.
Everybody wanted to help give information to solve this crime. They were inundated.
Despite having their share of leads, investigators have nothing concrete to go on, until now. Lab techs have lifted fingerprints from the pages of the porno magazine found at the crime scene.
The lab results on the porn magazine were the first major break in the case.
The fingerprints match local resident Joe Lowenthal, and he has a small-time criminal record. To Detective Ron Smith, the lead is almost too good to be true.
Here's a pornographic magazine. It's at the scene where the two dead girls were dumped. One of the possibilities is that the murder resulted from a sex crime. You got an adult male with a criminal record. We thought that was very significant. We found out where he lived, and we went to his house.
Joe Lowenthal, we asked you a few questions.
What's this about?
Confronted him with the fact that his fingerprint was found less than 20 feet from two dead bodies, and that he better have a good explanation.
Where were you on July 23rd?
And when put to the question, Joe gives detectives an answer they're not expecting.
He immediately told us that he had been there. He had gone there with his girlfriend, and they were doing some he-in and she-in out there with his magazine.
He was there with his girlfriend. She was sexually pleasuring him.
He thought that sounded plausible, but we did not actually believe him until we contacted his girlfriend the same day. And she absolutely corroborated his statement.
Both tell investigators they were at the dump site the day before the bodies were discovered, but they didn't notice anything strange. What seemed like a sure thing leaves investigators empty-handed. Joe is cleared of any suspicion.
The whole time we were looking into him, I thought, this is going to be our guy, you know, and when it didn't turn out, yeah, I was frustrated. I thought, now we're right back to square one.
Investigators turn back to who they feel is their most promising lead, Ethan Haldane. They're anxious to question him about accusations the girl's friends are making, that he made death threats against Dawn for borrowing his car.
Got a minute?
When he was confronted about his statement about wanting to kill Dawn, he didn't think it had been taken seriously, nor did he seriously suggest that.
I was playing around. I was only joking with her.
I believe Ethan was a bit humiliated when Dawn conned him out of his car and left him, of all places, at her house. He was embarrassed.
Being put on the spot, Ethan offers up some intriguing details about where he says the girls were the night they disappeared.
You want to talk to Sam, not me, Sam.
And he said, you might want to take a look at Sam. That night when the girls were dropped off, he got a phone call from Sam saying that the girls were in fact coming over and that they were going to party.
It's a damning bit of info on Sam Strange, but knowing Ethan's shady reputation, investigators aren't quick to buy into it. Detectives suspect Ethan is ratting out Sam to save his own skin, especially considering his violent threats against Dawn.
In talking with Ethan, I could tell that he wasn't really comfortable talking with police in the first place. Very defensive, sometimes even evasive.
Ethan will have to do more than point the finger at Sam to clear himself. When asked about his whereabouts the evening the girls vanished, Ethan says he was playing pool with his friend Darren Linza.
At one point we heard that Darren was taunting Ethan, that Dawn had taken his car, and what was he going to do about it?
You let Dawn punk you out of your car. Call it a punk! You punk!
But before investigators can confirm Ethan's story, a call comes in that changes everything.
911, what is your emergency?
We got a tip from a motorist who said he had seen Don and Chrissy hitchhiking on Highway 20. And then when he saw their pictures in the paper 10 days later, he thought, those were the girls I saw. He thought he saw Don and Chrissy get into a blue and gray van.
The motorist, Isaiah Beatty, says he remembers seeing Dawn and Chrissy on July 24th, the day after they were last seen alive with Sam.
The information from Isaiah was viable because the girls had a history of hitchhiking.
If Isaiah's story is true, this is good news for Sam Strange because he's no longer a suspect. Now someone has seen the girls after they left his house.
It's also a big break for the investigators. They now have a specific vehicle to track down, and possibly the girl's killer. And as luck would have it, 5 days after calling the police, Isaiah thinks he sees the very same van in the parking lot of a local bank.
He called us and said he saw the van that the girls got into, and he had a license number. That was huge.
He's pretty excited, so he calls the police to come over and check it out.
Mind if we take a look inside your van?
Yeah, all right.
He gave us permission. And there was no evidence that there had been any kind of violence inside that van. We realized we're right back to square one. We don't have anything.
This hitchhiking lead basically was a case of mistaken identity.
Isaiah has the wrong van. In fact, he never had an accurate license plate number. The hitchhiking theory is growing fainter by the minute in the detective's rearview mirror. Investigators can't afford to chase any more false leads. They must regroup and reassess their two possible suspects, Sam Strange and Ethan Haldane.
The actual connection between these guys, these buddies, or their activities on and around the night that the girls were last seen alive by Sam, we just kept coming back to that.
They all had questionable backgrounds. They all knew Chrissy and Dawn.
Sam and Ethan are sticking to their stories.
$10, you can't make that shot.
Ethan says he was playing pool with Darren Linza on the evening of Saturday, July 23rd. When investigators check with Darren, he backs up Ethan's alibi.
Thank you.
But Darren's not exactly a trustworthy source.
We did background investigation on Darren, and we found that he had a minor criminal record. He's basically what you'd call kind of a thug.
Sam maintains the girls left 20 minutes after they arrived at his house to hitchhike into town. But he has no alibi, saying he stayed home and watched television after the girls had gone. Investigators asked the two friends to submit to a polygraph.
Ethan took one first. He came in voluntarily and took an exam and passed. And when we told Sam that Ethan was cooperative, I think the onus was on Sam. It would have looked funny for him if his buddy took one and he didn't.
Sam reluctantly agrees to come in.
After the test, the polygraph operator approached us and said, "This is not your man. He passed this test."
Sam continued to insist that he had nothing to hide, which has to be why he agreed to take the polygraph test in the first place.
With this latest setback, Detective Smith fears his chance at solving this case is slipping away. So on September 3rd, more than a month after the bodies were found, he returns to the crime scene, desperately searching for a clue they may have overlooked.
About 50 feet from where the bodies had been dumped, they found a black plastic trash bag.
We thought, that's odd. Why would somebody throw away an empty bag? We marked it as evidence and sent it to the crime lab.
And when the results come back 6 days later, what seemed ordinary turns out to be extraordinary.
They had examined the black plastic bag and found that there was blood inside.
Only do they find human blood, but what they believe could be the key to the crime itself.
We got a call a few days later from one of the fingerprint techs that they found a print.
It's the hard evidence they need to finally catch the killer. But it will also rock this tiny town to its core. On September 9th, 1994, homicide investigators finally make a major breakthrough on the case of Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell. Fingerprints have been lifted from a bloody trash bag that was found where the bodies were recovered over a month ago.
Things really started falling into place after that. The girl's DNA was found inside the bag in that blood. When I heard about this evidence, I was really excited.
When they run the fingerprints, they get a hit. On file are matching prints of someone who'd been charged a year earlier for public intoxication. And that person is one of the prime suspects.
The fingerprints match Sam Strange.
Re-energized by the new evidence, investigators head to Sam's house on September 20th to execute a search warrant.
They showed up at his property prepared to search his house, search his body, search his truck, search the grounds around the property.
And there's no shortage of evidence. They find traces of blood below a porch deck and in the flatbed of Sam's truck.
They even went so far as to bring a dive team because there was a small pond on the edge of Sam's property. And it's a good thing that they did, because in the pond, they found a long-handled axe.
We thought that the axe may have been used in the crime. Maybe the weapon that crushed these girls' skulls.
DNA lab analysis ties the blood found at Sam's family's ranch to Dawn and Chrissy. On September 28th, 3 months after the girls disappeared, Sam Strange is arrested for the murders of his friends, Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell. No one can fathom how this boy, who had been so close with Dawn and her family, could be capable of such a brutal slaying.
Dawn's mom definitely considered Sam to be a family friend. I think she trusted him. When the focus of the investigation began to center around Sam, it was a bitter pill for her to swallow.
I did not suspect Sam. I didn't have a reason to, until he gave me one.
I felt a lot of anger because he took 2 lives that were my friends.
At his trial on November 7th, 1995, the prosecution argues that Sam called Ethan Haldane that night when the girls were at Sam's. The phone call may have ignited an argument between Sam and Dawn, who was still angry over the incident with Ethan's car.
There's only 3 people who know the actual story. One of them's not saying and 2 can't say.
The only thing I can think of, there must have been some type of altercation.
I think that he lost it. Some people snap worse than others.
Enraged, Sam at some point picked up a heavy object, likely the axe, and struck Dawn in the head.
Unplanned, unsophisticated, a blitz attack.
He doesn't stop there. Realizing Chrissy could rat him out, Sam decides she too must die.
It is possible that Chrissy was a witness to Dawn's murder.
One was killed first, and the other was killed just because they were there and a witness.
The prosecution goes on to describe what they believe Sam did next.
Sam's in a position where he's looking around and thinking, I got to get rid of these bodies. Head wounds bleed a lot, and so I think he probably got trash bags and put over their heads. And these 2 petite teenage girls were probably just carried and thrown in the back of his pickup.
Sam had murdered my sister and Chrissy, and then disrespectfully, and drove him out to the middle of nowhere and dumped him.
In February 1996, Sam Strange is convicted of the murders of Dawn Donaldson and Chrissy Campbell. Neither Ethan nor Darren are charged with any crime related to the murders. Sam is sentenced to 2 15-years-to-life terms to be served consecutively.
I was at his sentencing. He appeared to be very unemotional. He did offer an apology, but not heartfelt.
My reaction to the conviction and the verdict was happiness. He wasn't going to get away with it. He was going to be where he belonged.
Over 20 years later, the verdict still hangs heavy over Grass Valley.
If you say the Sam Strange case, they know what you're talking about. It's part of this town's history now.
This particular case resounded a lot more because of the age of the girls. They were innocent children.
These girls had their lives taken away at 16. No chance to grow up, no chance to have a family.
Oh, I love you. I miss you. I wish she was here. I wish that she got to have children. So much has happened in 21 years that I'd like to tell her.
Families will never forget. I will never forget.
Grass Valley has never thoroughly recovered from these murders. It has left a huge imprint on this community. I think it made everybody more cautious of your neighbor, not so trusting.
Evil happened in this little town.
The letter arrived at exactly 3:17 in the afternoon on a rainy Tuesday in October. Nobody remembered the sound of the rain that day. Nobody remembered the traffic moving through the streets of Black Ridge Falls. Nobody remembered the ordinary things that usually disappear into the background of life. But everyone remembered the envelope. It was small. White. Almost forgotten among thousands of pieces of paperwork stored inside the evidence archive of the Black Ridge Falls Police Department. For 30 years, it had been sitting in a box marked Case File 92-417, Carter, Emily, Missing Person. A case that had haunted the town. A case that had destroyed families. A case that investigators had once promised would never be abandoned. But promises fade. Evidence gets buried. People move away. And sometimes, the truth waits longer than anyone expects. The envelope had no return address. No fingerprints that could immediately identify who had touched it. No clear explanation of why it had appeared in the evidence room after 3 decades. Only 5 words were written on the front. You were looking wrong. For years, investigators believed Emily Carter disappeared somewhere along the old river road outside town. They believed she had been taken after leaving the Autumn Lantern Festival on the night of October 14, 1992. They believed the answer was hidden somewhere in the woods, somewhere beneath the cold waters of Black Ridge River, somewhere in the forgotten corners of a town that had spent decades pretending the past was finally buried. But the message inside that envelope suggested something much darker. Someone knew the investigation had been wrong from the beginning. And someone had been waiting 30 years to say so. Black Ridge Falls was the kind of town where people believed nothing truly terrible could happen. A quiet place surrounded by forests and mountains. A place where neighbors knew each other's names. A place where children rode bicycles through empty streets until sunset and families left their doors unlocked during summer evenings. In 1992, the population was barely 20,000. The biggest news stories were usually school sports, local festivals, and debates over whether the old factory on the edge of town should be renovated or demolished. Then Emily Carter disappeared. And overnight, Black Ridge Falls became the center of a mystery nobody could explain. Emily was 17 years old. She was a senior at Black Ridge Falls High School. Teachers described her as intelligent, quiet, and determined. She was not the type of person who disappeared without telling anyone. Her mother, Laura Carter, knew every detail about her daughter's routine. Emily always called when she was going to be late. She always left notes on the kitchen counter. She always came home before midnight. But on that cold October night, Emily never came home. The last confirmed sighting came shortly after 10:40 p.m. Several witnesses remembered seeing her near the entrance of the Autumn Lantern Festival, carrying a small backpack and wearing a blue jacket. A friend waved goodbye. Emily smiled. She said she was walking home. It was a route she had taken hundreds of times before. Less than 2 miles. A simple walk through familiar streets. A walk that should have taken 20 minutes. But Emily Carter vanished somewhere between the festival lights and her front door. The first hours after her disappearance were filled with confusion. At first, police believed Emily had simply stayed somewhere overnight. Teenagers sometimes made unexpected decisions. Sometimes they avoided calls. Sometimes they wanted space. But Laura Carter knew immediately something was wrong. At 6:15 the next morning, she called the police. Her voice was calm. Almost too calm. Because when someone is truly afraid, they do not always sound afraid. Sometimes they sound certain. She would never do this, Laura told investigators. Those words would become one of the most repeated statements in the entire case. Emily would never do this. She would never leave without telling someone. She would never abandon her family. She would never disappear. Within hours, volunteers filled the streets. Police searched parks, abandoned buildings, hiking trails, and every road leading out of town. Helicopters scanned the forests. Dogs followed possible scent trails. Posters with Emily's face appeared everywhere. At gas stations. At grocery stores. On telephone poles. A teenager who had been a stranger to most of the town suddenly became the face everyone saw every morning. But the search produced almost nothing. Until 3 days later. At 8:32 a.m., a fisherman discovered something near the eastern bank of Black Ridge River. A blue bicycle. Partially hidden beneath fallen branches. The tires were covered in mud. The chain was damaged. But investigators confirmed it belonged to Emily. The discovery changed everything. Because until that moment, police still hoped Emily had simply left town. The bicycle suggested something else. Something had happened near the river. Something violent. Something that had stopped Emily from continuing home. The area was immediately sealed. Detectives searched every inch of the riverbank. They collected soil samples. Footprints. Fibers. Anything that might explain what happened. But the river kept its secrets. No body was found. No weapon was discovered. No witness came forward with a clear explanation. The case entered its most frustrating phase. The phase investigators feared most. A missing person case without a person. A crime without a crime scene. A mystery without an answer. Detective Michael Reeves was one of the first investigators assigned to Emily's disappearance. He was 20 years into his career. He had handled robberies, assaults, and violent crimes. But Emily's case was different. Because every possible answer seemed to disappear the moment investigators reached for it. The first theory was that Emily had run away. That theory collapsed quickly. Her bedroom was untouched. Her clothes remained in her closet. Her savings account had no activity. Her diary contained no indication that she planned to leave. The second theory was that Emily had met someone she knew. Investigators interviewed dozens of people. Friends. Classmates. Neighbors. Teachers. Anyone who had spoken to her in the days before she vanished. But again, nothing. No arguments. No threats. No suspicious behavior. Then came the third possibility. A stranger. Someone passing through town. Someone who saw an opportunity. Someone who knew exactly how to disappear afterward. That possibility terrified the community. Because if the person responsible was unknown, then anyone could be responsible. For months, investigators chased hundreds of leads. Most went nowhere. A truck driver reported seeing a vehicle near the river that night. The description was too vague. A woman claimed she saw Emily arguing with someone near the festival. Later, she admitted she was not certain. A teenager said he heard a scream near the river. But he waited 6 months before telling police. By then, investigators questioned whether the memory was real or something created by fear. The case became a maze. Every path led somewhere. And every path ended in darkness. 30 years later, Detective Reeves was long retired. The town had changed. New buildings replaced old ones. Families moved away. Children who once searched the woods for Emily were now grandparents. But some things never disappeared. Every October, when the Autumn Lantern Festival returned, people still remembered. They remembered the girl in the blue jacket. They remembered the posters. They remembered the unanswered questions. And they remembered that somewhere out there, the truth was still waiting. The new generation of investigators knew Emily Carter only as a file number. A photograph. A cold case. But when forensic analyst Sarah Bennett opened that forgotten evidence box in 2022, she did not see an old file. She saw a person. She saw a 17-year-old girl whose life stopped on a single night. And she saw something nobody else had noticed. The envelope. The message. The impossible clue that had been hidden for 30 years. Inside was a letter. 3 sentences. No signature. No explanation. Only a warning. You searched the river. You searched the roads. You never searched the house. And beneath those words was the smallest trace of evidence. A single biological sample. A piece of DNA that should not have existed. Because when the laboratory results came back 2 weeks later, investigators discovered something that would reopen the entire case. The DNA belonged to a man who had been officially dead for 21 years. And suddenly, the disappearance of Emily Carter was no longer a missing person case. It was a secret someone had spent decades trying to protect. The laboratory report arrived just after sunrise. At first, Sarah Bennett thought there had been a mistake. She had seen unexpected results before. Contaminated samples. Damaged evidence. Incomplete profiles. Cold cases were full of surprises because time changed everything. Evidence degraded. Memories became unreliable. Records disappeared. But this was different. This was impossible. The DNA profile recovered from the old envelope belonged to a man named Daniel Voss. A man who had been dead since 2001. A man whose official death certificate stated that he had died 21 years earlier in a house fire outside Black Ridge Falls. A man who had never appeared anywhere in the original investigation. Sarah stared at the computer screen for several minutes without moving. The report did not change. The numbers did not change. The name remained exactly the same. Daniel Voss. The name meant nothing to her at first. Until she opened the archived database. And then she found the photograph. A black and white image from a newspaper article dated February 2001. A middle-aged man standing outside a burning house. The headline read, "Local mechanic killed in late-night fire. Daniel Voss. 48 years old. Former owner of Voss Auto Repair. A respected member of the community. A man remembered by neighbors as quiet, polite, and dependable. A man everyone believed was gone forever. But his DNA had just appeared on a piece of evidence connected to Emily Carter's disappearance. The impossible question was no longer who left the clue. The question was, how could a dead man know something about a crime that happened 30 years ago? Sarah immediately contacted the Black Ridge Falls Cold Case Unit. The department had changed dramatically since 1992. The old filing cabinets were gone. The handwritten reports had been digitized. The detectives who once searched the riverbank were retired or deceased. But Emily Carter's file remained. Thousands of pages. Hundreds of interviews. Photographs. Maps. Evidence logs. A lifetime of unanswered questions stored inside a digital folder. Lieutenant Marcus Hale was assigned to review the case. Unlike Sarah, Hale remembered Emily. Not personally, but as a child. He was 9 years old when the town was covered with missing person posters. He remembered seeing her face everywhere. He remembered his parents locking the doors earlier at night. He remembered adults whispering whenever her name came up. To him, Emily Carter was not just another cold case. She was the reason an entire town changed. When Sarah placed the DNA report on his desk, Hale looked at it for a long time. "This is not possible," he said. Sarah nodded. "That was my first thought." Hale leaned back in his chair. "Then someone made it possible." And that sentence changed the direction of the entire investigation. Because if Daniel Voss was truly connected to the evidence, then there were only a few explanations. Either the DNA sample was somehow connected to the original crime, or someone had deliberately planted it. Either possibility meant the same thing. Someone had been manipulating the investigation. The first step was reopening everything. Not the theories. Not the rumors. The evidence. Cold case investigators know one rule better than anyone. Time destroys memories. But evidence waits. Sometimes for decades. The team began by examining every item collected in 1992. Emily's backpack. Her bicycle. Her clothing. The soil samples from the river. The original witness statements. Most of it had been reviewed countless times. But forensic technology in 1992 was nothing like it was 30 years later. Back then, investigators searched for fingerprints, hair samples, visible clues, things they could see. DNA testing was still in its early stages. The smallest traces of biological material could be ignored because nobody knew how valuable they would become. Now, every microscopic detail mattered. And the first major discovery came from the envelope itself. The paper was old. The ink had faded. But the adhesive on the back contained something unusual. A partial fingerprint. Not enough for identification, but enough to prove one thing. The envelope had not been stored untouched for 30 years. Someone had handled it recently. Someone had accessed evidence that was supposed to be locked away. The case was no longer only about Emily Carter. It was about whoever had been inside the evidence archive. The investigation turned inward. The department began reviewing access records. Every person who entered the archive. Every employee who opened the files. Every technician. Every officer. The list was long. But one name immediately caught attention. Thomas Keller. Former evidence technician. Retired 3 years earlier. Keller had worked at the department from 1995 to 2019. He had handled thousands of pieces of evidence, including old cold case files, including Emily Carter's file. When investigators contacted him, Keller seemed surprised, but not shocked. That detail bothered Marcus Hale. Most people hearing that a 30-year-old missing person case had suddenly reopened would react with confusion, fear, curiosity. Keller reacted differently. He became quiet. Too quiet. "You found something?" he asked. Hale noticed the wording. Not. "Did you find something?" Not. "Is there new evidence?" But. "You found something." As if he already knew something was there. The interview room became colder. Hale placed the photograph of the envelope on the table. "Do you recognize this?" Keller looked at it for 3 seconds. Then looked away. "No." The answer came too quickly. Sarah, watching through the observation room glass, noticed. People who truly do not recognize something usually look longer. They search their memory. They try to understand. Keller did not. He avoided. But the strangest discovery came from an old box stored in the basement of the police department. A box that had never been part of the official evidence. Inside were copies of newspaper articles, handwritten notes, and photographs collected by former Detective Michael Reeves. Personal investigation material. Things he kept after retiring. Among the papers was a single handwritten sentence. Written in 1993. 1 year after Emily disappeared. The note said, "The river was staged." Investigators had never seen it before, because it was never entered into the official case file. Marcus Hale immediately contacted Reeves. The retired detective was 80 years old. His health was failing. His memory was not what it used to be. But when Hale mentioned Emily Carter's name, something changed. The old detective became completely alert. "You found something," Reeves whispered. Again, those words. The same reaction. The same strange certainty. Hale asked him what he meant. For several seconds, Reeves said nothing. Then he answered. "Because I spent 30 years hoping someone would." Reeves agreed to meet at his home. The house was filled with old photographs, awards, police memorabilia. A lifetime spent chasing answers. But sitting across from him, Hale noticed something unusual. Reeves did not look like a man surprised by a reopened investigation. He looked like a man waiting for one. "I made mistakes," Reeves said. Hale stayed silent. "Everyone thinks we failed because we couldn't find Emily." He looked toward the window. "But that's not the truth." "Then what is?" Reeves took a deep breath. "The truth is we found something." The room went silent. Sarah leaned forward. Hale stared at him. "What did you find?" Reeves looked down. "A house." The answer seemed too simple. Too ordinary. "What house?" Reeves slowly raised his eyes. "The Carter house." Nobody spoke. Because for 30 years, everyone had searched the places where Emily disappeared. The river. The roads. The woods. But nobody had seriously considered the one place where Emily had always been safe. Her own home. Reeves continued. The night Emily vanished, everyone focused on the walk from the festival to her house. His voice became quieter. "But we never asked the most important question." He paused. "What if she actually made it home?" The words landed heavily. Because if Emily Carter had returned home that night, then the entire investigation had been built on the wrong assumption. And somewhere inside that possibility was the darkest question of all. If Emily had reached her house, who was already waiting for her there? For 30 years, the Carter house had been considered the beginning of the search. Never the ending. Investigators had walked through the front door dozens of times after Emily disappeared. They had photographed her bedroom. They had examined her belongings. They had questioned her family. But they had always been looking for signs that Emily had left. They never considered the possibility that she had returned. That one mistake changed everything. Because the most terrifying places are not always the abandoned buildings, the dark forests, or the empty roads. Sometimes they are the places that look completely normal. Places where people eat dinner. Places where families sleep. Places where nobody thinks to look deeper. The Carter house stood on Willow Creek Lane, on the northern edge of Black Ridge Falls. 30 years later, it was no longer the same home. The white paint had faded. The garden had become overgrown. The old wooden fence leaned toward the street. But the structure remained. A silent witness. A place that had held secrets longer than anyone realized. The current owner, a retired teacher named Helen Morris, had purchased the property in 2010. She knew the history. Everyone in Black Ridge Falls knew the history. But like most people, she believed Emily Carter had disappeared somewhere outside town. She never imagined that the answer might have been beneath her own floorboards. When investigators arrived with a new search warrant, Helen watched from the driveway. She looked confused. "Why are you searching here?" she asked. Marcus Hale looked at the old house. Then back at her. "Because we may have been searching in the wrong place for 30 years. The new search began carefully. No dramatic scenes. No flashing lights. No crowds gathering outside. Cold cases rarely reopen with explosions. They reopen quietly. With gloves. With evidence bags. With investigators examining details everyone else ignored. The team started with Emily's old bedroom. The room had changed many times over the decades. Paint colors. Furniture. Decorations. But the original structure remained. The walls. The floor. The ceiling. Every surface was scanned. Every corner photographed. Sarah Bennett focused on something most investigators in 1992 could never have considered. Microtraces. Tiny pieces of evidence invisible to the human eye. A single fiber. A small particle. A microscopic fragment left behind. Evidence does not always disappear. Sometimes it hides. 3 hours into the search, an investigator found something beneath the wooden floor near the hallway. A small gap between two boards. Inside was an object wrapped in plastic. At first, everyone assumed it was old trash. Something forgotten during construction. But when the plastic was opened, the room became silent. Inside was a photograph. Not a newspaper photo. Not a family picture. A private photograph. One that had never been seen before. It showed Emily Carter standing outside the Autumn Lantern Festival. The same blue jacket. The same backpack. The same night she disappeared. But someone else was in the photograph. A figure standing several feet behind her. The image was blurry. The face was not visible. But the person was clearly there. And the photograph had one impossible detail. It had been taken from a location where no public photographer had been standing. Someone had been watching Emily. Someone close. Someone hidden. The discovery sent shockwaves through the department. Because investigators now had something they never had before. A timeline. The photograph proved Emily was not simply walking home alone. Someone had been following her. But the question remained. Who took the picture? And why hide it for 30 years? The photograph was sent for forensic examination. Experts analyzed the paper. The ink. The aging process. The conclusion was disturbing. The photograph was authentic. It was taken in 1992. It had been hidden shortly after. Meaning someone connected to the case had possessed it all along. Someone who knew exactly what happened that night. The next breakthrough came from the back of the photograph. Written in faded ink were 3 numbers. 1047. No explanation. No date. Just a time. Investigators compared it with the original timeline. Emily was last seen near the festival entrance at approximately 10:40 p.m. Her home was less than 20 minutes away. If she walked directly home, she should have arrived around 11 p.m. But the number suggested something happened 7 minutes later. 10:47. A moment nobody had ever investigated. A moment between the festival and the disappearance. A moment when Emily was still alive. Marcus Hale returned to the old case files. He searched every report mentioning the festival. Every witness statement. Every note. Then he found something. A statement from a teenager named Lucas Bennett. In 1992, Lucas was 17. He was one of the last people known to have spoken with Emily. His statement had been considered unimportant. He told police that he saw Emily leave the festival. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. But beneath his official statement was a handwritten note from Detective Reeves. A note that had never been included in the final report. It said, "Witness changed his story." Hale immediately looked for Lucas Bennett. The address in the file was outdated. The phone number disconnected. No current records. For 3 decades, Lucas Bennett had disappeared from the public record. Almost as completely as Emily Carter. The investigation expanded. Detectives searched old employment records, school databases, property information. Eventually, they found him. Lucas Bennett was living under a different name in another state. When contacted, he refused to speak. At first. But after hearing one sentence from Detective Hale, everything changed. Emily Carter's case has been reopened. There was a long silence. Then Lucas answered. "I knew this day would come." Those words immediately raised suspicion. Because people do not usually wait 30 years for a day they believe will never happen. A video interview was arranged. Lucas appeared older. Gray hair. Tired eyes. A man carrying the weight of something he had never confessed. For several minutes, he said nothing. Then he looked directly into the camera. And said, "I lied." The confession changed the case. But not in the way investigators expected. Lucas did not claim responsibility. He did not admit harming Emily. Instead, he revealed something far more disturbing. He said Emily had not walked home alone. Someone had followed her. Someone she recognized. Someone she trusted. And Lucas knew who it was. The person who took the photograph. The person connected to the DNA. The person whose name had been hidden from the investigation for 30 years. When Marcus Hale asked him to identify the person, Lucas looked down. His hands began shaking. Then he whispered. It was someone everyone trusted. A pause. A breath. Then the name came out. A name nobody expected. A name that would force investigators to question everything they believed about Emily Carter's disappearance. Because the person Lucas named was not a stranger. Not an outsider. Not someone passing through town. It was someone who had been part of the investigation from the very beginning. The name remained suspended in the interview room like a sound nobody wanted to hear. For several seconds after Lucas Bennett said it, nobody moved. Not Marcus Hale. Not Sarah Bennett. Not the investigators watching through the glass. Because sometimes the most shocking revelations are not the ones that introduce a new suspect. They are the ones that destroy everything you already believed. Lucas had not pointed toward a hidden criminal living in the shadows. He had not named a stranger. He had named someone whose face had appeared in the case file hundreds of times. Someone whose signature appeared on official documents. Someone whose words had shaped the entire investigation. Someone the town had trusted. Former Detective Michael Reeves. The room became silent. Marcus Hale stared at Lucas. "Are you saying Detective Reeves was involved?" Lucas looked away. "No." The answer came quickly. Almost desperately. "Not like that." Hale leaned forward. "Then explain." Lucas closed his eyes. For 30 years, he had carried the memory of that night. And now, with the investigation reopened, the past had finally caught up with him. "Reeves wasn't the person who took Emily," Lucas said. "Then why did you name him?" Lucas looked toward the floor. "Because he knew." Those two words changed everything. He knew. Not suspected. Not guessed. Knew. Detective Michael Reeves had spent 30 years being remembered as the man who never gave up. The detective who searched every road. The detective who questioned every witness. The detective who kept Emily Carter's photograph pinned above his desk long after retirement. To the public, he was the investigator who failed to solve the case. To Lucas Bennett, he was something else. A man who discovered the truth. And chose silence. After the interview ended, Marcus Hale returned to Reeves' home. This time, he did not arrive as someone seeking information. He arrived as someone looking for answers. The retired detective opened the door slowly. One look at Hale's face was enough. "You talked to Lucas," Reeves said. Hale froze. There it was again. That certainty. "You knew we would find him." Reeves stepped aside. "Come in." The old detective looked exhausted. Not surprised. Not angry. Just tired. As if he had been waiting for this moment for decades. Inside the house, Hale noticed something on the wall. A photograph. Emily Carter. The same photograph used on missing posters in 1992. Below it was a handwritten note. "Every case has a moment when the truth appears. The question is whether someone is brave enough to accept it." Hale looked at it. "You wrote this?" Reeves nodded. "Yes." "Why?" The old detective remained silent. Then he answered. "Because I failed her." Reeves did not deny Lucas's accusation. Instead, he told a story that had never been included in any official report. A story that began on the night Emily disappeared. According to Reeves, the original investigation moved too quickly toward one theory. The river. The abandoned roads. The possibility of a stranger. Everyone wanted a simple explanation. A dangerous outsider. A random attack. Something that would allow the town to believe the threat came from somewhere else. But Reeves noticed inconsistencies. Small things. Details that did not fit. The bicycle. The riverbank. The timeline. The photograph. He believed the scene had been manipulated. But when he tried to push the investigation in another direction, he was stopped. Not by criminals. Not by threats. By pressure. Political pressure. Community pressure. And something even more disturbing. A warning. "Who warned you?" Hale asked. Reeves looked toward the window. The streets outside were quiet. Almost exactly like they were 30 years earlier. Someone inside the department. Hale's expression changed. Who? Reeves did not answer immediately. Because naming that person would reopen another wound. The problem wasn't that we didn't have clues, Reeves said. The problem was that some clues were never allowed to become evidence. The next day, the department reopened every document connected to Emily's case. And they discovered something disturbing. Several pages were missing. Not lost. Not damaged. Removed. The original evidence inventory showed items that had been collected but were never entered into the official archive. Among them, a second photograph from the festival, a jacket fiber sample, a handwritten witness statement, and a sealed envelope from Detective Reeves. The envelope was marked, "Do not file until verified." Nobody knew what happened to it. Until now. The DNA from Daniel Voss had created one mystery. But the missing evidence created another. Who had access to the files in 1992? Who removed evidence? Who protected the truth? The investigators started reviewing old department records. And one name appeared repeatedly. Assistant Chief Robert Mercer. In 1992, Mercer was the highest-ranking officer overseeing the Emily Carter investigation. He was the person who approved major decisions. The person who controlled resources. The person who signed off on evidence transfers. Today, Robert Mercer was considered a respected former public servant. He had received awards. Given interviews. Spoken publicly about improving community safety. But according to Reeves, Mercer was the man who ordered him to stop digging. Investigators found Mercer living in a retirement community several hours away. When they arrived, he seemed calm. Too calm. He welcomed them inside. Offered coffee. Asked about the weather. Then Hale mentioned Emily Carter. The expression on Mercer's face changed. Not confusion. Recognition. "You finally opened that file again," he said. Hale noticed immediately. "You knew it was going to happen?" Mercer smiled faintly. "No." A pause. "I knew someone eventually would." The interview lasted 4 hours. Mercer denied involvement. He denied removing evidence. He denied knowing who harmed Emily. But there was one question he refused to answer. Why did he approve the original search of the Carter house only once? And why was the search conducted for less than 40 minutes? In 1992, investigators documented that Emily's bedroom was examined. But they never performed a complete forensic search. No floor analysis. No structural examination. No trace evidence collection. Nothing beyond what could be seen. A decision that seemed insignificant at the time, but now looked like something else. A deliberate mistake. That night, Sarah Bennett reviewed the old evidence photographs. She noticed something nobody had noticed before. A detail hidden in the background of one image. A shadow. A reflection. Something inside the Carter house. She enlarged the photograph. Enhanced the image. And then she saw it. A figure standing in the hallway. Not outside. Not near the river. Inside the house, the image quality was poor. The face was impossible to identify. But the timing was clear. The photograph had been taken after Emily arrived home. Which meant one terrifying possibility had to be considered. Emily Carter may not have disappeared on the road. She may have disappeared inside her own house. The discovery forced investigators to return to the original crime scene. But there was a problem. The Carter house was no longer the same. Years of renovations had changed everything. Walls had been removed. Floors replaced. Rooms rebuilt. The physical evidence from 1992 should have been gone forever. Unless someone had hidden something before the renovations began. And then Sarah remembered the photograph. The hidden message. The DNA. The dead man's impossible connection. Daniel Voss. The man whose DNA appeared on the envelope. Because when investigators looked deeper into Daniel Voss's past, they found something they had missed for 30 years. Before owning his auto repair shop. Before his death in the fire. Daniel Voss had worked for one person. A person connected directly to the Carter family. A person who had never been questioned as a suspect. And when investigators uncovered the old employment records, they found the final piece of the puzzle. Daniel Voss had been hired by the Carter family's neighbor. A man named Richard Vale. The same man who reported seeing Emily's bicycle near the river. The same man who had been considered a helpful witness. The same man who had helped organize the first search party. And the same man who had spent 30 years telling everyone he wanted the truth. But investigators were about to discover something far more disturbing. Richard Vale had not just been near the case. He had been at the center of it. And the evidence hidden for 3 decades was finally beginning to reveal why. Richard Vale had spent 30 years building the image of the perfect neighbor. He was the first man to knock on Laura Carter's front door after Emily disappeared. The first to volunteer his pickup truck for the search. The first to print missing person flyers at his own expense. The first to stand before television cameras, his voice breaking as he pleaded for Emily to come home. People remembered him carrying flashlights through the woods. Helping organize volunteers. Bringing coffee to exhausted deputies working through freezing nights. To Blackridge Falls, Richard Vale became part of the story of compassion. Nobody ever imagined he might also be part of the story of deception. Marcus Hale began reconstructing Richard's life 1 year at a time. Not the version remembered by neighbors. The version preserved in records. Property deeds. Employment files. Insurance claims. Tax documents. Phone directories. One detail emerged almost immediately. Richard had lived directly across the street from the Carter family for nearly 15 years. From the front porch of his house, he could see Emily's bedroom window. It was an ordinary suburban street. Children played basketball in the afternoons. Families waved to each other across neatly trimmed lawns. No one questioned why Richard always seemed to know when the Carters left for work. No one questioned why he often offered to collect their mail while they were away. Small towns are built on trust. Trust often leaves doors unlocked. Sarah Bennett focused on another name that kept appearing beside Richard's. Daniel Voss. The supposedly dead mechanic whose DNA had reopened the investigation. Employment records showed that Voss had worked for Richard's construction company during the late 1980s before opening his own repair shop. The relationship appeared ordinary. Employer. Employee. Nothing suspicious. Until Sarah requested payroll records. Daniel had stopped receiving paychecks nearly 6 months before he officially resigned. Yet witnesses remembered seeing him working every day. Why would someone continue working without pay? The answer came from an old accountant's notebook discovered in storage. Handwritten beside Daniel's name were 2 words. Private arrangement. No explanation. No contract. Nothing else. Investigators interviewed former employees who had worked alongside Daniel decades earlier. Most remembered little. Time had blurred details. Faces disappeared. Conversations faded. But one retired carpenter remembered something unusual. Daniel was frightened during his final months. Not nervous. Terrified. He kept saying he'd seen something he shouldn't have, the carpenter recalled. Did he ever explain what? The old man shook his head. He only said one thing. Marcus leaned forward. What was it? He said. If anything happens to me, don't believe the fire. The fire. For more than 20 years everyone accepted the official conclusion. Faulty electrical wiring. Accidental ignition. Complete destruction of the small farmhouse Daniel rented outside town. The body recovered inside was identified through dental records. The investigation ended within days. Case closed. But now every conclusion demanded another look. State forensic specialists reopened photographs from the original fire investigation. Technology unavailable in 2001 now allowed analysts to reconstruct burn patterns digitally. The new report raised immediate concerns. The fire had burned unusually fast. Too fast. Certain structural beams showed signs of accelerant exposure. Even stranger, the area where Daniel's body had supposedly been discovered experienced lower temperatures than surrounding rooms. It made no sense. Unless the body had been placed there after the fire began. Or the body wasn't Daniel Voss at all. The request for exhumation was approved within 48 hours. News spread quickly. Blackridge Falls had lived quietly for decades. Now reporters returned. Satellite trucks lined the courthouse. National media began asking the same question. How could a dead man's DNA appear in a cold case? The cemetery remained closed while forensic teams carefully opened Daniel's grave. Marcus stood silently beside Sarah. Neither spoke. The coffin emerged slowly. Years of decay had done their work. Yet enough skeletal material remained for testing. The laboratory worked around the clock. 3 days later the results arrived. The remains buried beneath Daniel Voss's headstone were not Daniel Voss. The revelation stunned investigators. The dental records from 2001 had been falsified. Or misused. Someone else's body had been buried under Daniel's name. Which meant one impossible conclusion became unavoidable. Daniel Voss had never officially died. For 21 years. He had existed somewhere beyond every government record. A ghost. Marcus Hale immediately ordered a nationwide search. Driver's licenses. Employment databases. Medical records. Border crossings. Nothing. It was as though Daniel Voss had vanished deliberately. Until Sarah made an unexpected discovery. Daniel's social security number had never been used again. But another identity appeared only 6 months after the fire. A man named David Nolan. Same age. Similar physical description. No birth hospital listed. No childhood records. The identity simply appeared. Like someone had stepped into a new life. Meanwhile, investigators continued searching the Carter house. This time they focused beneath the staircase. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an anomaly below the concrete foundation. A cavity. Small. Artificial. Construction records showed no reason for empty space beneath that section of the house. Engineers carefully removed part of the basement floor. Every movement was documented. Every inch photographed. Beneath nearly 18 inches of concrete they uncovered a rusted metal box. It had been intentionally sealed. Protected from moisture. Protected from time. Sarah carefully opened the lid. Inside lay dozens of cassette tapes. A disposable camera. Several handwritten notebooks. And a silver house key attached to a faded blue ribbon. Laura Carter immediately recognized it. Emily's spare key. The one she always carried in her backpack. The disposable camera was sent for emergency development. Most investigators expected ruined film. Instead, against all odds, several images survived. The first photographs showed ordinary festival scenes. Children carrying lanterns. Food stands. Live music. Nothing unusual. Then came the final 6 photographs. Emily had apparently been taking pictures while walking home. One image showed the empty sidewalk. Another showed parked cars. Then, a photograph of a man standing beneath a streetlight. His face partially hidden. Watching. The next picture was blurred. As though Emily had begun running. The following image showed only darkness. The 5th captured the inside of a front hallway. The Carter house. The final frame was completely black. Except for one bright reflection. A wristwatch. Investigators enlarged the reflection repeatedly. The image quality was poor. But one distinctive feature became visible. A cracked glass face across the watch crystal. Marcus froze. He had seen that watch before. Not in evidence. Not in photographs. On someone's wrist. Very recently. He hurried to the evidence room. Pulled old interview recordings. Paused on footage from Robert Mercer's interview. The retired assistant chief had worn an old analog wristwatch. Cracked glass. Same location. Same distinctive fracture. Sarah compared measurements. The pattern matched perfectly. Robert Mercer had been wearing the same damaged watch for decades. A watch that appeared inside the Carter house on the night Emily disappeared. Marcus felt a chill run through him. Richard Vale. Daniel Voss. Michael Reeves. Robert Mercer. For weeks these names had seemed like separate threads. Now they formed something else. A network. Not necessarily of killers. but of people connected by one forgotten night. One shared secret. One decision that altered dozens of lives. The investigation was no longer searching for a single suspect. It was uncovering a conspiracy of silence. But before Marcus could obtain a warrant for Mercer, another call came in. An elderly woman had arrived at the police station carrying a sealed envelope. She refused to speak to anyone except the lead investigator. When Marcus entered the interview room, she slid the envelope across the table. "I've kept this hidden for 30 years, she whispered. "My husband made me promise never to open it." Marcus carefully unfolded the yellowed paper inside. It was a hand-drawn map. Not of the river. Not of the festival. It was a detailed sketch of an underground storm drainage system beneath Blackridge Falls. Near one tunnel entrance, someone had written 3 chilling words in faded pencil. She was here. The map was older than anyone in the room expected. The paper had turned brittle around the edges. The pencil lines had faded into faint gray scars, but the layout remained unmistakably precise. Whoever drew it knew the underground storm drainage system better than the town engineers who had maintained it for decades. Every junction. Every access hatch. Every maintenance tunnel. Every forgotten branch sealed beneath layers of asphalt and concrete. Marcus Hale spread the map across the conference table. Sarah Bennett stood beside him, tracing the handwritten notes with a gloved finger. Most of the markings referred to utility lines. Inspection shafts. Water flow directions. Nothing unusual. Until they reached the southeastern corner of the map. A small circle had been drawn in red ink. Next to it were the words that had haunted everyone since the envelope was opened. She was here. Not she is. Not look here. Past tense. As though someone had once known exactly where Emily Carter had been. The elderly woman who delivered the map introduced herself as Eleanor Brooks. She was 78 years old. Her late husband, Harold Brooks, had worked for the town's public works department for nearly 40 years. His job had been simple. Maintaining roads. Inspecting drainage tunnels. Repairing collapsed culverts after heavy storms. He was the kind of man nobody noticed. Which made him the perfect witness. Because people often speak freely in front of workers they consider invisible. Eleanor explained that Harold returned home one evening in October 1992 looking terrified. Not worried. Terrified. He refused to discuss what had happened. 3 nights later he placed the map inside a sealed envelope. He handed it to Eleanor. "If anything ever happens to me," he had said quietly, "give this to someone who still wants the truth." Then he made her promise one thing. Never open it. She kept that promise for 30 years. Harold Brooks died of natural causes in 2018. The envelope remained hidden in the back of a cedar chest inside their bedroom. Eleanor almost threw it away several times. She nearly burned it after moving into a smaller home. But every October she remembered Harold's face. The fear. The silence. The way he woke screaming during the weeks after Emily disappeared. When she saw a television report announcing the reopening of the Carter investigation, she finally understood why her husband had protected the envelope for so long. Within hours, engineers located the tunnel marked on the map. It lay beneath an abandoned industrial district on the eastern side of Blackridge Falls. The entrance had been sealed behind a concrete retaining wall sometime in the early 2000s. Official records claimed the tunnel flooded repeatedly and posed a safety hazard. Oddly, no maintenance reports explained why it had been permanently closed. Marcus requested excavation equipment. By sunrise the following morning, workers had removed enough concrete to expose the original steel access door. It was rusted shut. The lock had not been opened in decades. When cutting torches finally broke the hinges free, stale air escaped from the darkness below. The smell carried damp earth, old concrete, standing water, and something else. Something metallic. The first descent was slow. Floodlights illuminated the narrow passage. Water dripped steadily from cracked ceilings. The tunnel stretched farther than expected, branching beneath streets that no longer existed above ground. Spray-painted maintenance numbers remained visible on the walls. Most dated back to the 1970s. Sarah noticed footprints almost immediately. Not fresh. Not recent. Preserved in dried layers of mineral deposits along one section of the tunnel floor. Someone had walked here long after the tunnel was supposedly abandoned. The team followed the map. Left at the first junction. Straight through an old maintenance chamber. Right beneath what had once been a textile warehouse. Exactly 400 feet from the entrance, they reached the red circle. The chamber was larger than the others. Nearly circular. The ceiling rose almost 20 feet overhead. One wall had partially collapsed decades earlier, exposing compacted soil behind the concrete lining. Marcus swept his flashlight slowly across the room. Nothing. Just debris. Broken pipes. Old tools. Then Sarah's light reflected off something buried beneath loose dirt. A small brass buckle. The excavation began immediately. Every handful of soil was screened. Every layer documented. Hours passed. No one spoke more than necessary. The deeper they dug, the quieter the chamber became. Then an evidence technician stopped. "There's fabric." Everyone froze. Slowly, carefully, brushes replaced shovels. Dark blue cloth emerged beneath the soil. Weathered. Fragile. But unmistakable. A jacket. The same color described in every missing person bulletin from 1992. Laura Carter had told investigators 30 years earlier that Emily left home wearing a blue windbreaker. Now a blue jacket rested beneath nearly 3 decades of earth. Folded. Deliberately placed. Inside one pocket, investigators discovered something astonishing. Not jewelry. Not identification. A cassette tape. Protected inside a waterproof plastic pouch. The label contained only 2 handwritten words. October 14th. No name. No explanation. The tape was rushed to the forensic laboratory. Technicians cleaned the magnetic reels by hand. The recording was badly damaged. Sections were silent. Others distorted by age. Yet fragments survived. At first only static filled the speakers. Then footsteps. Distant music. Laughter from the Autumn Lantern Festival. Emily had apparently activated a small portable recorder while walking home. The sound quality was uneven. Wind. Passing cars. Then. A man's voice. Too faint to understand. Emily answered. Her voice sounded calm. She knew whoever was speaking. Another burst of static interrupted the recording. When audio specialists filtered the interference, 3 words became audible. You're home early. Not, I'm home. Not, go home. You're home early. The sentence suggested Emily had already arrived somewhere. Someone was greeting her. Someone inside a house. The recording continued for another 18 seconds. A door opened. Wood creaked. Footsteps echoed indoors. Then everything changed. A loud crash. Emily gasped. The recorder struck the floor. Muffled voices. One unmistakable sentence. No, please. The tape ended. No scream. No struggle beyond that final moment. Only silence. Marcus listened to the recording 5 times. Then a 6th. Each replay revealed tiny details. A grandfather clock chiming. A dog barking somewhere outside. Water running through pipes. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a lived-in home. Not an isolated forest. Not a riverbank. Emily had almost certainly reached a house alive. The question was whose. Meanwhile, forensic anthropologists completed their excavation inside the tunnel. No human remains were discovered. Instead, they uncovered signs that something, or someone, had once been removed. The soil layers had been disturbed years earlier. Microscopic voids indicated a body-sized object had rested there before being excavated. Someone had returned. Someone who knew exactly where to dig. Back at headquarters, Sarah compared the tunnel map with old municipal construction records. One detail stood out immediately. In 1998, 6 years after Emily disappeared, a special emergency maintenance project had been approved. Official purpose: stormwater reinforcement. Actual work performed: concrete poured only around the chamber where the jacket had been hidden. No other section of the drainage system received repairs. The authorization signature belonged to Assistant Chief Robert Mercer. A police official. Not an engineer. Not a city planner. There was no legitimate reason for Mercer to approve underground construction. Unless the project had another purpose entirely. To seal something away. Forever. That evening Marcus received an unexpected phone call. The number was blocked. He answered without speaking. For several seconds the caller remained silent. Then an older male voice quietly said, "You found the tunnel." Marcus's grip tightened around the phone. "Who is this?" The caller ignored the question. "You're digging where you shouldn't." Marcus remained calm. "If you know something about Emily Carter, now is the time." Another long silence. Then the voice spoke again. "You're looking for a grave." A pause. "You won't find one." The line disconnected. The recording was immediately traced. The signal had bounced through multiple prepaid devices before terminating near Black Ridge Falls. Professional. Deliberate. Someone had anticipated electronic tracing. Marcus replayed the voice repeatedly. Something about it felt familiar. Not the words. The rhythm. The breathing. The measured pauses. He had heard that voice before. Somewhere. Not in the tunnel. Not during interviews. In an old recording. He rushed to the archive room, pulled dozens of interview tapes from 1992, and began listening. Hours passed. Nothing. Then, just after midnight, he found it. An interview conducted 3 days after Emily vanished. A volunteer search coordinator answering routine questions. Only 2 minutes of audio. At the end of the tape, after investigators believed the recorder had stopped, the coordinator quietly asked another officer. "Did anyone check the tunnels?" The officer laughed. "What tunnels?" The coordinator replied. "The old drainage system." Marcus froze. The voice matched almost perfectly. The volunteer coordinator's name appeared on the interview label. Richard Vale. The voice refused to leave Marcus Hale's mind. It wasn't merely similar. It carried the same measured cadence. The same deliberate pauses between sentences. Even the faint rasp at the end of certain words matched the old interview tape recorded 3 decades earlier. Richard Vale. For years he had stood beside grieving families, comforted volunteers, and shaken hands with investigators. If the voice truly belonged to him, then he had known about the drainage tunnels from the very beginning, long before anyone else remembered they even existed. Marcus didn't announce his conclusion. Instead, he closed the archive room door and listened to both recordings again, this time with Sarah Bennett. Neither of them spoke until the final words faded into silence. Sarah finally broke it. "I can't say they're identical." Marcus nodded. "Neither can I. But I'd bet they came from the same man." The following morning, Richard Vale's house looked almost exactly as it had in photographs from the early 1990s. Fresh white paint. A carefully trimmed lawn. Flower boxes beneath every window. The appearance of someone who believed in order. Someone who disliked surprises. Richard answered the door wearing a gray sweater and an expression that seemed almost welcoming. "Detective." Marcus smiled politely. "Mind if we talk?" Richard stepped aside. "I've been expecting you." That sentence lingered. "Not I thought you'd come. Not I wondered when you'd arrive." He had been expecting them. As though every move of the investigation had unfolded according to a timetable only he understood. The living room was immaculate. Family photographs lined the shelves. Travel souvenirs filled a glass cabinet. Nothing suggested the home of a man hiding dangerous secrets. Marcus noticed one photograph in particular. A community volunteer event from the summer of 1993. Nearly everyone connected to the original search appeared in the picture. Firefighters. Deputies. Volunteers. And standing quietly near the back was Daniel Voss. Alive. 8 years before the fire that supposedly killed him. Marcus filed the observation away without reacting. Richard noticed the glance. "Good people," he said softly. Marcus looked back at him. "Were they?" Richard smiled faintly. "Most of them." The interview began gently. Questions about the search parties. Emily Carter. The old neighborhood. Richard answered without hesitation. His memory remained remarkably sharp for events more than 30 years old. Too sharp. He remembered dates. Weather conditions. Volunteer assignments. The exact number of flashlights distributed on the second night of the search. Most people lose details over time. Richard seemed to have preserved every one. Finally, Marcus placed the tunnel map on the coffee table. Richard looked at it for only a second. Recognition flashed across his face before disappearing. I haven't seen one of those in years. Marcus remained silent. You know what it is. I used to help with maintenance projects. Another answer. Another small piece. Nothing incriminating. Everything informative. Sarah wandered quietly through the hallway while Marcus continued talking. She wasn't searching. Not officially. She was observing. Old houses tell stories through details. A repaired wall. A replaced floorboard. Fresh paint covering older damage. One thing immediately stood out. The grandfather clock standing near the staircase. Dark oak. Hand-carved. Its brass pendulum swung with slow precision. Every 60 seconds it produced a soft mechanical click. Sarah stopped walking. She closed her eyes. Click. Another. Then she remembered the recovered cassette. Hidden beneath decades of soil. Emily's final recording. Just before the crash. A clock. Not identical, but strikingly similar. Marcus noticed Sarah's expression. She didn't interrupt. She simply looked toward the hallway. Marcus understood. He stood. Beautiful clock. Richard glanced over his shoulder. It belonged to my father. Still works? Richard nodded. Perfectly. Marcus approached it. The clock chimed once. A deep, resonant tone. Exactly the sort of sound that might echo through an old house. Exactly the sort of sound audio specialists had isolated from Emily's recording. Not proof. But another coincidence. Too many coincidences had already accumulated. When they left the house, neither detective spoke until they reached the car. Finally Sarah said quietly, "I've counted 12. Marcus looked at her. 12 what? 12 coincidences. She began listing them. Richard lived across from Emily. He knew the tunnel system. He employed Daniel Voss. He discovered the bicycle. He organized the search. His voice resembled the anonymous caller. He owned a grandfather clock matching the recording. He anticipated investigators' questions. He appeared in photographs with Daniel. He remained deeply involved after the disappearance. He never left Black Ridge Falls. And somehow, he had always been exactly one step ahead. Marcus started the engine. Coincidences aren't evidence. Sarah nodded. No. She looked back toward Richard's house. But sometimes they point toward wherever the evidence is hiding. That afternoon the forensic audio laboratory called. They had completed a more advanced enhancement of Emily's cassette. The results surprised everyone. Using modern spectral reconstruction, analysts separated overlapping sounds from the recording. Behind Emily's voice. Behind the footsteps. Behind the clock. Another sound emerged. A train horn. Long. Low. Distinctive. Marcus frowned. There hadn't been an active railway near the Carter home. Not in 1992. But there had been one place where freight trains passed every evening. The abandoned textile district. Less than half a mile from the storm drainage tunnel. City planning records confirmed another forgotten detail. Before redevelopment, Richard Vale had owned a storage warehouse beside those railway tracks. The building no longer existed. It had been demolished in 2004 after being declared structurally unsafe. Marcus requested the demolition files. Most were routine. Engineering reports. Permit applications. Photographs. One image stopped him cold. Taken just before demolition, it showed the warehouse interior. Near the rear wall stood a heavy steel door. Unusual. Too thick for an ordinary storage room. Blueprints identified it simply as sub-basement access. Marcus turned the page. No architectural drawings showed what lay beneath. Only a handwritten note from the demolition supervisor. Basement inaccessible due to collapse. Filled with concrete before demolition. He read the sentence twice. Filled with concrete. Another structure permanently sealed. Just like the drainage chamber. Just like someone wanted pieces of the past to disappear beneath layers no one would willingly dig through. Marcus looked at Sarah. I think we've been asking the wrong question. She waited. We keep asking where Emily disappeared. He folded the blueprint carefully. What if someone spent 30 years making sure we'd never discover where she was taken next? By sunrise, the demolition records had become the center of the investigation. The warehouse no longer existed. A modern distribution center occupied the land, its concrete loading bays stretching across what had once been a maze of brick walls and rusted machinery. Forklifts moved silently through the morning fog while employees began another ordinary workday, unaware that the ground beneath them had suddenly become part of a decades-old mystery. Marcus Hale stood outside the security fence, studying a faded aerial photograph from 1994. The warehouse had not been large. 2 floors above ground. 1 documented basement. 1 undocumented sub-basement. That last detail refused to leave his mind. Buildings rarely acquire hidden levels by accident. Someone had designed it. Someone had paid for it. Someone had chosen not to include it in the official plans. City archives yielded little. The original blueprints had been submitted in 1968 by a construction company that no longer existed. Most records had been destroyed in a courthouse flood years earlier. Only fragments survived. Invoices. Tax assessments. Inspection summaries. Enough to establish ownership, but not enough to explain the missing sub-basement. Then Sarah noticed something unusual. The final building inspection before demolition had not been conducted by the city's engineering department. Instead, it had been certified by a private consulting firm. The signature belonged to an engineer named Calvin Rhodes. Unlike most names in the case, Calvin Rhodes was still alive. He lived less than 40 miles from Black Ridge Falls. Rhodes welcomed investigators into a modest farmhouse surrounded by overgrown fields. He was 83. His eyesight had faded, but his memory remained surprisingly clear. When Marcus placed the warehouse photograph on the kitchen table, Rhodes sighed before anyone asked a question. I wondered when that building would come back. Marcus exchanged a quick glance with Sarah. You remember inspecting it? I remember refusing. The answer landed like a stone. Rhodes explained that in 2004 he had initially declined to certify the demolition. The structure contained a sealed underground chamber that did not appear on any official plans. He recommended a complete archaeological survey before construction crews filled it with concrete. His recommendation disappeared. A week later he received revised paperwork bearing his own signature. Except he had never signed it. Someone had forged his approval. Did you report it? I tried. What happened? Rhodes leaned back slowly. I was told the matter had already been resolved. By whom? He hesitated. Assistant Chief Mercer. The name surfaced again. Always nearby. Never at the center. Always close enough to influence events without becoming the story himself. Marcus felt the investigation tightening like a knot. Mercer had authorized tunnel repairs. Mercer had limited the original search. Mercer had overridden engineering concerns. Every path eventually curved back toward him. A warrant was issued for a comprehensive review of Mercer's financial records. The forensic accounting team expected retirement income, pension payments, routine investments. Instead they found a pattern. Every 5 years, beginning in 1993, Mercer had received anonymous deposits into a small investment account under a family trust. The amounts were modest. Never large enough to attract attention. Always just below mandatory reporting thresholds. Whoever made the payments understood financial oversight. The money originated through a chain of dissolved shell companies. One company stood out. Vail Agricultural Holdings. Richard Vail's family business. Marcus drove directly to Mercer's retirement residence. This time, the former assistant chief did not answer the door. Neighbors reported seeing him leave before dawn. His car remained in the garage. His phone was still charging inside the house. He had simply vanished. The irony was impossible to ignore. For 30 years Mercer had helped investigate a disappearance. Now he had staged one of his own. A statewide alert was issued. Highways, bus stations, airports, hospitals. No confirmed sightings. Mercer seemed to have anticipated the investigation several moves in advance. Sarah stood inside the abandoned house, studying family photographs left behind. One frame caught her attention. Mercer receiving a civic award in 1998. Beside him stood Richard Vail. Between them, a younger man wearing work overalls. Sarah removed the photograph from the frame. She turned it over. On the back, someone had written a single name. Daniel. Not Voss. Just Daniel. Alive. 3 years before his supposed death. The search for Daniel Voss intensified. Facial recognition specialists generated age-progressed images. Federal databases were queried again. Nothing. Then an analyst noticed a detail everyone else had overlooked. Daniel's fingerprints had never been entered into any national system. Only local employment files contained his records. If he assumed a new identity before digital databases became widespread, he could have disappeared almost completely. Unless someone recognized his face. That recognition came from an unexpected place. A retired park ranger named Eli Turner contacted investigators after seeing Daniel's age-progressed image on television. "I've seen that man," he said. "Where?" Turner unfolded an old hiking journal. "I used to patrol Ashwood Ridge every spring." Ashwood Ridge lay nearly 100 miles north of Blackridge Falls. Sparse forests. Abandoned fire towers. Few permanent residents. Turner pointed to an entry dated May 2008. Met quiet handyman at St. Matthew's Chapel. Called himself David. Fixed roof alone. Beside the note was a rough sketch. The resemblance to Daniel Voss was unmistakable. Marcus and Sarah drove north immediately. St. Matthew's Chapel stood alone at the edge of dense woodland, its weathered stone walls untouched by time. The priest welcomed them kindly. When shown Daniel's photograph, he nodded without hesitation. "Yes." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "You know him?" "He stayed here many years ago." "What name did he use?" "David Nolan." The same alias uncovered in the financial investigation. The priest explained that David had lived quietly in a small caretaker's cottage for almost 18 months. He repaired roofs. Restored wooden pews. Never caused trouble. Then one morning he simply left. Without saying goodbye. Without leaving a forwarding address. He seemed frightened, the priest added softly. "Of what?" He never said. The old priest looked toward the forest. But every few weeks, he would drive back to Blackridge Falls. Inside the abandoned caretaker's cottage, investigators found little. Dust covered every surface. Most belongings had long since disappeared. Then Sarah noticed a loose floorboard beneath the bed. Inside rested a small leather notebook wrapped in oilcloth. The pages contained maintenance schedules, fuel receipts, directions. Nothing remarkable. Until the final page. There, in neat handwriting, appeared a single sentence. "I should have told them about Emily." No further explanation. No names. Only that one confession. Marcus closed the notebook carefully. For the first time, Daniel Voss no longer appeared to be a hidden accomplice. He looked like a man running from something he had witnessed. Or survived. As investigators prepared to leave the chapel, Sarah paused beside an old donation box. A faded envelope protruded slightly from beneath a ledger. It was addressed simply. "For whoever still believes the truth matters." Inside lay a key. Old brass. Heavy. Attached to it was a weathered luggage tag. The tag bore an address that no longer existed. Warehouse District. Blackridge Falls. Unit Beat 14. Marcus stared at the tag. The warehouse had been demolished 22 years earlier. Unit Beat 14 should have been buried beneath thousands of tons of concrete. Unless the key had never belonged to the warehouse at all. Unless there had been another place. Another building. Another room carrying the same designation. A place someone expected would remain hidden even after the warehouse disappeared. For the first time since reopening Emily Carter's case, Marcus realized the investigation might not be uncovering the final chapter of the mystery. It might only now be finding the first door. The brass key sat alone in an evidence tray under the harsh white lights of the forensic lab. It looked ordinary. Worn teeth. Rounded edges. A thin scratch running across the bow where years of use had polished the metal smooth. Yet everyone in the room understood that ordinary objects often survive where memories fail. Marcus Hale watched as technicians photographed every angle before making a wax impression. Sarah Bennett, meanwhile, focused on the faded luggage tag. B14. Not painted. Stamped. Industrial lettering. The style dated back to the late 1980s. It belonged to a commercial storage system, not necessarily a warehouse, but something designed to catalog dozens, perhaps hundreds, of identical units. "Maybe we've been looking at the wrong building," she said quietly. Marcus looked up. "You think B14 wasn't inside the warehouse?" "I think someone wanted us to assume it was." The city archives reopened once again. Storage facilities. Rail freight depots. Agricultural cooperatives. Factory inventories. Anything that had once used alphanumeric unit designations. Hours turned into a day. Then another. Finally, an elderly records clerk remembered something almost everyone else had forgotten. "There used to be municipal evidence lockers," he said. Marcus frowned. "Evidence lockers?" The clerk nodded. "Not police evidence." He pointed toward an old zoning map. Civil defense. During the Cold War, Blackridge Falls had constructed a network of underground emergency storage bunkers beneath several public buildings. Most were abandoned by the early 1990s, sold to private owners, or simply sealed and forgotten. Each compartment carried a designation. A01. A02. B14. Marcus felt a familiar chill. Only one bunker remained standing. Beneath the old county records building on the western edge of town. Construction crews had planned to demolish it years earlier but discovered the reinforced concrete walls were too expensive to remove. Instead, they filled the entrance with brick and converted the upper floors into municipal offices. The underground level remained untouched. Officially. By late afternoon, engineers reopened the blocked entrance. A rusted steel staircase descended into darkness. Unlike the drainage tunnels, the bunker remained remarkably dry. Rows of heavy steel doors stretched down a narrow corridor. Dust covered every surface. No footprints. No signs of recent entry. Until they reached door B14. It stood slightly open. Only a fraction of an inch. Someone had been there. Not decades ago. Recently. Marcus gently pushed the door inward. The hinges groaned. Inside sat a small room no larger than a walk-in closet. Metal shelves lined the walls. Most stood empty. Except for a single cardboard archive box resting neatly in the center. Waiting. The box contained dozens of files. Property deeds. Insurance policies. Personal letters. Newspaper clippings. Every document related, in one way or another, to Emily Carter. But none had ever appeared in the official investigation. Someone had quietly built an entirely separate case. One page immediately drew Sarah's attention. It was a handwritten timeline. Not of Emily's disappearance. Of the days that followed. October 15th. Meeting at Carter residence. October 16. River search redirected. October 18. Tunnel inspected. October 19. Decision unanimous. Marcus read the final line twice. Decision unanimous. No explanation followed. Only 5 signatures. Most had faded beyond recognition. One remained perfectly legible. Richard Vale. Another signature resembled Robert Mercer's handwriting. A third looked remarkably similar to Daniel Voss. Marcus stared silently. Whatever happened after Emily disappeared had not been the work of one frightened individual. Several people had gathered, discussed something, reached a unanimous decision, then spent 3 decades protecting it. The question had changed again. Not who took Emily, but what decision required so many ordinary people to remain silent? Hidden beneath the documents lay a cassette recorder. Unlike the damaged tape recovered from the drainage tunnel, this machine still contained batteries. Corroded. Long dead. A label covered the side. Meeting, October 19, 1992. Sarah looked toward Marcus. Neither spoke. Technicians transported the recorder directly to the laboratory. Hours later, after painstaking restoration, the tape finally played. Static. Then voices. At least 5. No introductions. No names. The recording began in the middle of an argument. Can't keep pretending. Another voice interrupted. We don't have a choice. Someone struck the table. If this comes out, everything collapses. Marcus recognized one speaker almost immediately. Richard Vale. Older recordings confirmed the match. Then came another familiar voice. Robert Mercer. Calm. Measured. Authoritative. The discussion continued. Fragments emerged through damaged audio. She saw. Was never supposed. Protect the families. The tape skipped violently. Then one sentence emerged with heartbreaking clarity. We're already too late for Emily. Silence followed. Long enough to hear someone crying. Then the recording ended abruptly. No confession. No explanation. Only proof that several people had met days after Emily vanished. And all of them believed Emily was already beyond saving. Marcus replayed the sentence repeatedly. We're already too late for Emily. Not. We hurt Emily. Not. Emily is dead. Just. Too late. It suggested panic. Failure. Perhaps even regret. That evening another breakthrough arrived from the forensic anthropology team. Soil recovered from Emily's jacket contained rare mineral particles. The composition matched only one location within 50 miles. The old Black Ridge Quarry. Closed since 1987 after a series of dangerous landslides. The quarry had flooded over time, leaving deep pools surrounded by unstable cliffs. Few people ever visited. Access roads had long since disappeared beneath thick forest. Marcus looked at the geological report. Then at the map recovered from Harold Brooks. A forgotten tunnel. A forgotten bunker. Now. A forgotten quarry. The investigation was becoming a map of places everyone had stopped remembering. Just before midnight, Marcus received a handwritten note slipped beneath his apartment door. No stamp. No envelope. Someone had delivered it by hand. Only one sentence appeared on the page. Stop looking for a killer. Nothing else. No signature. He turned the paper over. Blank. Sarah arrived minutes later after receiving an identical note. Then Lieutenant Alvarez. Then the district attorney. Whoever sent them had access to every investigator's address. Someone was watching. Very closely. Marcus folded the note carefully. For the first time since reopening Emily Carter's case, he found himself considering an unsettling possibility. Perhaps the greatest secret hidden for 30 years was not the identity of a murderer. Perhaps it was the reason so many people believed the truth could never be allowed to surface. And somewhere beyond the flooded quarry. Beyond the sealed bunker. Beyond the names that had dominated the investigation. Someone was still alive. Someone who knew exactly what had happened on the night Emily Carter disappeared. Someone who had finally decided it was time for the silence to end. Dawn broke over Blackridge Falls beneath a blanket of low-gray clouds, turning the abandoned quarry into a landscape that looked less like a place on a map and more like a memory refusing to disappear. Marcus Hale parked at the end of what had once been a gravel access road. Nature had spent decades reclaiming the site. Young pines pushed through cracked asphalt. Rusted warning signs leaned at impossible angles, their faded lettering barely visible beneath moss. Danger, unstable ground. The warning was older than most of the officers standing behind the yellow tape. The quarry had officially closed after a massive rockslide in 1987. Since then, rainwater had filled the excavation pit, creating a dark lake nearly 100 feet deep in places. Local legends claimed abandoned machinery still rested beneath the surface. Legends had a way of growing around places where facts disappeared. The geological report had been precise. Mineral traces recovered from Emily's jacket matched the quarry's distinctive shale composition. The concentration was unusually high. It was not the sort of residue someone would pick up while simply driving past. She, or at least her jacket, had spent time there. The challenge was determining when. Before she vanished? After? Or years later, when someone attempted to hide evidence? Marcus watched drones rise into the mist, their cameras mapping every inch of the flooded basin. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the surrounding slopes. Divers prepared equipment near the waterline. No one expected quick answers. Places like this kept secrets beneath layers of rock, mud, and silence. Sarah Bennett walked toward the remains of an old maintenance office overlooking the quarry. The roof had collapsed years earlier, but part of the concrete foundation remained intact. She stopped suddenly. The floor wasn't level. One corner had settled differently from the rest. She knelt, brushing away loose gravel. Fresh scrape marks. Not recent enough to shine, but newer than the surrounding weathered concrete. Someone had moved something heavy. Not 30 years ago. Within the last few years. Marcus joined her. They carefully shifted broken timber from the corner of the building. Beneath it lay a rectangular steel hatch concealed beneath dirt and leaves. No records mentioned an underground room beneath the office. Yet there it was. Locked. The brass key recovered from B-14 was tried almost as an afterthought. It slid smoothly into the rusted lock. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a silent glance. One turn. A metallic click echoed beneath the concrete. The hatch opened. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Unlike the drainage tunnels, this space was dry. Deliberately maintained. Dust covered the steps, but only lightly. Someone had visited long after the quarry closed. The room below measured perhaps 20 feet across. Shelving lined the walls. An old generator occupied one corner. Fuel cans. Lanterns. Blankets. Boxes of preserved food long past expiration. It looked less like a hiding place and more like an emergency refuge. As if someone had prepared to stay there for days. Or weeks. Sarah examined a workbench near the back wall. A notebook lay beneath a sheet of plastic. The pages had yellowed, but the handwriting remained clear. The entries began in November 1992. No names. No explanations. Only observations. She keeps asking the same question. She doesn't remember everything. The fever is worse today. Marcus read the lines again. His heartbeat slowed. There was only one possibility that fit. Whoever wrote the notebook believed Emily had survived the night she disappeared. Before anyone could speak, a forensic photographer called from the opposite side of the room. Behind a row of shelving stood a narrow wooden door. It had been painted the same color as the walls. Easy to overlook. Inside was a tiny bedroom. A single metal bed. A dresser. Children's novels stacked neatly on a shelf. One faded blue scarf folded with unusual care. The room felt strangely peaceful. Not abandoned in panic. Abandoned quietly. As though its occupant expected to return. Sarah opened the dresser. Most drawers were empty. The bottom drawer contained a small leather journal. The first page was dated October 23, 1992. The handwriting was uneven. Shaky. As though written by someone recovering from injury. The opening sentence stopped everyone in the room. I don't know why they won't let me go home. No one spoke. Marcus turned the page carefully. The entries were fragmented. Some only a few lines long. The writer described headaches. Confusion. Dreams that blurred into reality. Repeated questions no one would answer. One passage read. They say it's dangerous outside. They say people are looking for me. I can hear trains every night. I think they're lying. Another. The man with the gray coat keeps saying this is for my own good. No names. No location. But the voice felt unmistakably young. Hopeful at first. Then increasingly frightened. Sarah's eyes lingered on one final sentence written several weeks later. I remember the lanterns now. I remember the house. The remaining pages had been torn out. Forensic testing would determine who wrote the journal. Yet even before laboratory results arrived, the emotional weight of the discovery settled over the team. If the journal truly belonged to Emily Carter, then every assumption about the case would collapse. She had not simply vanished. She had lived beyond the night everyone believed she disappeared. For how long? No one knew. Above ground, divers reported another discovery. Near the deepest section of the flooded quarry, sonar identified a large metallic object resting beneath layers of sediment. Too regular to be natural. Roughly the size of a pickup truck. Recovery would require specialized equipment. Marcus ordered the operation to begin immediately. Storm clouds were already gathering. They might have only a few hours. Back inside the underground shelter, Sarah continued examining the notebook. Pressed between 2 pages, she found a brittle newspaper clipping. The headline announced a candlelight vigil for Emily Carter held in November 1992. Someone had circled a photograph of Laura Carter standing beside dozens of lit candles. Below the image appeared one handwritten line. "I was there. They just couldn't see me." Sarah slowly lowered the page. Whether literal or symbolic, the sentence carried unbearable sadness. Whoever wrote it had watched life continue without them. The recovery crane reached the quarry just as rain began falling. Divers attached lifting cables to the submerged object. The winch strained. Mud erupted through the dark water. Slowly. Very slowly. The object emerged. Not a truck. A steel utility trailer. Its rear doors had been welded shut decades earlier. Marcus felt every conversation around him fade into the background. 30 years of questions. 30 years of silence. Whatever rested inside that trailer had been hidden deliberately beneath 40 feet of water. As cutting torches sliced through the corroded welds, everyone stepped back. The doors creaked open. Flashlights swept across the interior. The trailer was empty. Almost. Only one wooden chair remained bolted to the floor. A length of broken chain lay beside it. And hanging from a rusted nail on the wall was a faded blue festival lantern. The same style distributed during the Autumn Lantern Festival on the night Emily Carter disappeared. Tied to the lantern with brittle string was a folded note. Marcus carefully unfolded the paper. The ink had almost disappeared. Only a single sentence remained legible. She escaped. Rain continued to fall long after the trailer had been lifted from the quarry. No one hurried to speak. The single sentence written on the damp sheet of paper had altered the entire investigation. She escaped. For weeks, Marcus Hale had believed he was following the trail of a murder concealed beneath decades of lies. Now he was confronting something far stranger. If Emily Carter had escaped, then every person connected to the secret had spent 30 years protecting not only the past, but the fate of someone who might have survived it. The trailer yielded almost nothing else. No fingerprints. No identifiable DNA. Time and water had erased nearly every trace. Yet forensic technicians made one unexpected discovery beneath the wooden floorboards. A tiny brass button, decorated with the emblem of Black Ridge Falls High School. Laura Carter identified it immediately. It matched the button sewn onto Emily's winter coat during her sophomore year. The coat she had left at home on the night she disappeared. The implication was subtle but important. Someone had brought clothing belonging to Emily into the trailer after October 14, 1992. The trailer had been used. But perhaps not in the way everyone first imagined. While the quarry search continued, Sarah Bennett received the laboratory report on the journal found beneath the maintenance office. The handwriting comparison was inconclusive. There were too few verified samples from Emily to establish certainty. But another result proved decisive. A strand of hair trapped between 2 pages yielded a partial DNA profile. It matched the biological material recovered from Emily's childhood hairbrush, preserved in family keepsakes. The journal had almost certainly belonged to Emily Carter. She had survived long enough to write it. That much was no longer speculation. Marcus returned to the final completed page. I remember the lanterns now. I remember the house. The sentence haunted him. Not because of what it revealed. Because of what it omitted. She remembered. But remembered what? The missing pages might have contained the answer. Or perhaps someone had removed them precisely because they did. The breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Robert Mercer surrendered. 48 hours after disappearing, the former assistant chief walked alone into a state police barracks nearly 200 miles away. He carried no luggage. No attorney. Only a weathered leather folder. I'll answer your questions, he told investigators quietly. But only if you stop chasing ghosts. Marcus arrived that evening. Mercer looked older than he had only days earlier. As though 30 years had finally caught up with him. He placed the folder on the table. Inside were letters. Not official reports. Personal correspondence exchanged among 5 people during the winter of 1992. Richard Vale. Daniel Voss. Michael Reeves. Harold Brooks. Robert Mercer. 5 ordinary citizens. 5 people connected by one extraordinary night. Mercer spoke slowly. There was no conspiracy to hurt Emily. Marcus remained silent. There was a conspiracy after. He explained that on the night Emily disappeared, she had witnessed an accidental collapse inside an abandoned service building near the quarry. Several adults had been using the structure without authorization while attempting to recover hazardous industrial chemicals left behind after the quarry closed. The building partially failed. One worker died instantly. Emily saw everything. Panicked adults feared criminal charges, environmental liability, and financial ruin. Instead of contacting authorities immediately, they made a catastrophic decision. Hide the accident. Protect their families. Convince themselves they could fix everything later. Emily was taken to the underground shelter because she had suffered a head injury during the collapse. According to Mercer, everyone believed they were buying time. Hours became days. Days became weeks. By the time they realized the magnitude of their mistake, fear had replaced reason. Every decision afterward only deepened the tragedy. Marcus interrupted. What happened to Emily? Mercer closed his eyes. I don't know. The answer sounded almost unbearable. He continued. Several weeks after arriving at the shelter, Emily disappeared again. This time for real. The underground room was found empty. The rear service door stood open. Fresh footprints led toward the forest. Then heavy rain erased the trail. No one ever found her. Not the people who had hidden her. Not the police. No one. The note inside the trailer. She escaped. Had been written by Daniel Voss after discovering she was gone. Marcus struggled to reconcile the story. If that's true, why keep lying? Mercer's voice cracked for the first time. Because once we waited. Once we failed to tell the truth. Every hour made confession harder. He looked toward the window. We became prisoners of our own silence. Richard Vale was arrested the following morning. Not for murder. For kidnapping, unlawful confinement, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, fraud, and numerous related offenses. He did not resist. When asked whether Mercer's account was true, Richard answered only once. We believed we could make things right. He never claimed they had. Daniel Voss was located 6 weeks later in a remote coastal town living under his assumed identity. Older. Frail. No longer running. He waived extradition immediately. His testimony largely confirmed Mercer's account. Then he added one final detail. The morning after Emily vanished from the shelter, he searched alone for nearly 12 hours. Near an old railway crossing, he discovered a single blue ribbon caught on a broken fence. The same color as the ribbon attached to Emily's spare house key. He never found another trace. For 30 years he believed she had survived. He never stopped hoping. Michael Reeves attended every hearing. He accepted responsibility for remaining silent after suspecting the truth had been buried beneath official decisions he could no longer control. He admitted fear had kept him from exposing his suspicions. Fear of destroying innocent families. Fear of accusing fellow officers without proof. Fear, he confessed, had accomplished nothing except allowing the silence to endure. Months later the Carter house stood empty once again. Laura Carter visited one final time before the property changed ownership. Marcus accompanied her through the quiet rooms. Neither spoke much. At the front door she stopped. I spent 30 years believing she never came home. Marcus nodded gently. Laura rested her hand against the old wooden frame. Maybe she did. A long silence followed. Then she smiled sadly. And maybe, somewhere after that, she found her own way. Emily Carter's ultimate fate remained unknown. No confirmed sighting. No remains. No definitive ending. The official investigation concluded with a revised classification. Abduction. Unlawful confinement. Missing. The file would never again be labeled a cold case. Not because every question had been answered, but because the truth hidden beneath 3 decades of fear had finally emerged. Not as a story about a monster lurking in the darkness, but as a tragedy born from ordinary people making one terrible decision. And then spending the rest of their lives convincing themselves there was still time to undo it. Years later, visitors walking through Blackridge Falls often paused beside the small memorial overlooking the river. Most read Emily Carter's name. Few noticed the second inscription added after the investigation closed. It contained no dates. No explanation. Only a single sentence carved into weathered stone. The truth does not disappear with time. It only waits for someone willing to uncover it. And every autumn, when paper lanterns drifted quietly across the river at sunset, the people of Blackridge Falls remembered not only the mystery that had once divided their town, but the silence that had nearly buried it forever.